It's a rare thing to see a horror series with near complete creative control from one person. Currently, Damien Leone seems to be in the driver's seat for the Terrifier series that we are almost certain to get more entries in, and I've talked about the Chucky/Child's Play series that Don Mancini is the driving force behind. There's also another Don that's in charge of another important horror series, though. Don Coscarelli gave us one of the most original and successful independent films of all time with 1979's Phantasm. He was nearly the very definition of auteur as he wrote, directed, shot, and edited that first movie, with his dad helping to produce it and his mom doing costumes, production design, and makeup. She also wrote the movie's novel tie-in. That first movie was shot for $200,000 and made a whopping $22 million at the box office. While it took some time, it got sequels that have run for nearly 40 years. Don directed the first 4 films in this series, but he still wrote and produced the final film in the franchise. Today we're discussing what is easily the black sheep of the series, Phantasm III: Lord of the Dead. While 4 is easily the worst, 5 is a flawed but interesting exercise, and 2 is the best of the sequels, 3 is either unfairly forgotten or unjustly disliked. The series itself didn't always do well, as it had the very scattered release schedule it does. This did build some excitement, but it wasn't nearly as consistent as series like Halloween, Friday the 13th, or A Nightmare on Elm Street. Rather than getting a new sequel nearly every year, the first movie in '79 was followed by sequels in 1988, 1994, 1998, and finally 2016. Coscarelli isn't a one-series wonder either, as he did cult favorites Beastmaster and Bubba Hotep, as well as an episode of Masters of Horror, and the not-quite cult hit John Dies at the End. Phantasm II was released theatrically and had a much higher budget than the first movie, going from $200,000 all the way up to $3 million. It brought in far less with only $7.3 million. Not terrible by any means, but certainly not as astonishing as its grindhouse predecessor. This one was planned to be released theatrically, but Universal had a dispute with Coscarelli that led it to only being released in 2 markets, St. Louis and Baton Rouge. While it only ran for 2 weeks, it was the highest grossing title in both territories for both weeks, and it ended up being one of the top 100 direct-to-video releases of all time. While that might not sound impressive, there were a lot, and I mean a lot, of movies released direct-to-video from the mid-80s to the mid-90s, so that is pretty solid. The movie would also bring back 2 actors from the original film, as Bill Thornbury would return as Jody, and A. Michael Baldwin would return as Mike after being replaced by James LaGrosse in Part 2. This is also when the series really starts to have Reggie go from a fan-favorite scene stealer to almost the main character, an arc that would conclude in the 5th installment, which, I'm guessing, barring a remake or new actors, will be the last. Angus Scrimm has sadly passed away, and Reggie Bannister has had increasingly failing health the past few years. It'd be hard to have a Phantasm without either of those 2 actors. The movie opens with a short recap of Part 2, including a small reshoot of Michael Baldwin in the back of the hearse to replace James LaGrosse. Unlike the second movie that makes a massive time jump from the first one, this one takes place immediately after Part 2 with Reggie being kicked out of the hearse and the car blowing up. This kills Part 2's love interest and sends Michael flying into a coma of sorts. Reggie gets to use the coolest shotgun in the history of media, and somehow all 4 shells blow up the heads of the non-copyright infringing Jawas, here called lurkers. In fact, this is the only movie that gives them this moniker, and it's also the only movie that gives the metal sphere the name of Sentinel.
What the fuck was that?
That's kind of hard to explain.
The tall man wants to take Mike, but Reggie goes full hardcore and threatens to blow the 2 of them up. The menacing look and line deliveries by Angus Scrimm are better in this movie than in most of the series, and by all counts, he's just a sweetheart in real life, making his portrayal even cooler.
And to me, the joy of seeing the film is going to see the audience reaction. I'm a spectator for the audience.
Scrimm is easily most identified with the tall man, but he had a fun career that lasted nearly 45 years. He got into acting late at, 45 years old, but made the most of it even if he was shoehorned into the horror genre. He also appeared in Chopping Mall, Subspecies, and the 2 Munchie movies. He was also the narrator in Wishmaster. As a small aside, it always makes me nostalgic to say or write the Tall Man, as my friend referred to me as that, and I'm not even that tall, nor has she ever seen these films. Short friend problems, I suppose. Reggie saves Mike from an attempted kidnapping or killing in the hospital after the nurse wanders in from the Evil Dead franchise. Out of her head pops a sphere, and they try to get out of town. Jody comes back for real after being in a coma dream, but is somehow trapped in one of the spheres himself. He has some sort of hot poker attachment, and the one that went after Mike had a cool eyeball attachment. This is the movie that really goes over the top with the use of these killing orbs. These may be the only thing that's cooler than Reggie's quad shotgun. They even ended up being a weapon in the second Turok game, but they were called cerebral bores there. The Tall Man comes for Mike, and Reggie is powerless to do anything. He wakes up with Jody now acting like a magic 8-ball, and this movie, more than any other movie in the franchise apart from Ravager, is Reggie's show. Reggie Bannister, because he is so cool that the character was named after him, made a career out of mostly low-budget horror. While he's most closely related to his formerly ice cream suit-wearing character, he also appeared in Wishmaster with Angus Scrimm's voice, Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, and the second Mangler sequel. His appearance on The Last Drive-In more or less confirmed how cool he was with his defense and attempted explanation of the movie series. Reggie is attacked by 3 looters who are home alone by a kid whose parents died.
Oh, Ghost, it's just a kid.
And Reggie decides to have tag along.
Thanks. I owe you one.
The dynamic between them is fun, and as kid actors go, we've gotten a lot worse here. The Tall Man turned his parents into lurkers, so he's more than happy to help out and possibly get revenge.
And I've been here ever since.
After dumping Tim at a house taking care of other kids, Reggie's captured again. Man, he's not very good at this, is he? 2 scavenger girls named Tanisha and Rocky tie him up before Tanisha gets a sphere to the dome. Rocky and Reggie escape with the help of a returning Tim and form a new team.
What's up?
Well, I guess you could say we're on a search and destroy mission.
Reggie tries and fails to get laid, a running theme in these movies.
Hey, loosen up a little. Yeah. Ever try vanilla?
And they end up in the town of Bolton, where Reggie goes on a strange trip in his head with Jody. He learns all about the Tall Man and ends up rescuing Mike. There's a fun little callback to the first movie, and they temporarily stop the Tall Man before we get a line stolen from Lethal Weapon. You know the one.
I'm too old for this shit.
Ash's hand from Evil Dead 2 attacks the group, and it's just another fun example of the entertaining practical effects that the movie was made with. Bright yellow blood, the gore effects during death scenes, the orbs, everything is done really well for a low budget, even if the movie doesn't make a lick of sense half the time. And half the time is being generous here. The crew is chased down by the Deadite or zombie versions of the creeps that Tim killed, and they blow them up in the car. They go looking for the Tall Man in the largest mausoleum in the western US, according to the movie anyway. Mike goes on to his own dream trip and sees the Tall Man's plans with even more cool effects.
His kind are amassing an army to conquer dimensions. He compacts the corpse, amputates the mind, and encases it. He then turns their bodies into drones and their minds into killers.
The zombies come back again and are able to finally capture our heroes, while Mr. Big and Creepy realizes he's being watched over by Mike. It's a really cool scene where Angus Scrimm manifests Mike into his plane of existence with nearly 100 spheres at his beck and call. The zombies are dispatched by Rocky, Reggie, and even a little help from Jody in sphere form, but Mike is being lobotomized by the Tall Man who's trying to, in his words, set him free. They spear and attempt to freeze the conquering alien, which is how I interpret him, and he freezes in the, well, freezer. A megasphere busts out of his skull. We also find out that Mike has always had a sphere of his own inside his head. Sure. He runs off with spheres in his eyes as Jody tries to take him down a trip through dreams. They freeze the tall sphere, and Rocky takes off.
Well, keep your balls in the air, Reg.
Tim and Reggie go back inside to investigate, and the movie ends on a cliffhanger that the series is known for. This one's ending is a similar fashion of the first one, with Tim being pulled through the glass like young Mike was all those years ago.
It's never over.
This was the first direct-to-video entry in the series, and could have set up a lot more in quick succession had they capitalized on its success and done more right away. But that's never been Coscarelli's speed. The fourth movie is as low budget and experimental as it gets, and is honestly pretty boring. The fifth and to date final entry does an admirable job trying to close out this epic story, but it loses a lot of the charm that makes part 3 a good cap to an interesting trilogy. This movie has it all, with 90s horror action, fun bad guys, great gore, and decent special effects. As I said earlier, the story's reach exceeds its grasp, but as Reggie himself said to Joe Bob Briggs when he was trying to explain the order of events, it's Phantasm, man. And if you were burned out after 4, or thought the series reached its peak with the second entry, give Phantasm III a spin, and remember,
It's never over.
No, you can't touch me.
Why not?
Oh, Ghost, it's just a kid.